How do you know that this is the right thing to do? When you and Susie, how did you make that decision that this is what we're going to do no matter what the experts say?
I think part of it has to do with the fact that instead of asking our brain, or the left side of our brain, the system of logic and reason, we went to here. But when I say here, I guess I don't mean the heart, but I probably mean the right side of the brain, which has to do with intuition. We decided to relax, to be centered, to look at somebody we loved and said to ourselves, what in our heart feels right? And we went with what felt right. I think too often all those rational systems, the logic, the theories, that ultimately results in things like tying children to chairs and electric shock treatment. That's the birth, and that's what comes from those kinds of systems. I think we're talking about, and if there's a message of this book, it's somehow that maybe parents could take on more of the directing ability to help themselves and help their children.
The book is called A Miracle to Believe In, and it says they loved a child back to life. And that's what the book looks like if you're looking for it. Let's find out about the second child that you loved back to life. How did this come about?
Okay, the Soto's family, they're from Mexico. They read about us through People magazine. They contacted us. They were incredibly persistent in terms of what they wanted to do. And ultimately we said yes. They came to New York with a child who was 6 years old, a child who was functioning at a 3-month-old level, who had a 7 IQ, who was considered the lowest functioning human being several institutions in New York had ever seen. They jeopardized their business. They jeopardized all their savings in order to find some help. And we said, okay, we'll spend 3 months working with you. In the same process, we'll develop a whole staff of volunteers, high school and college students, and we'll give your child every possible chance. We had an EEG done on him. The physician said, listen, I have proof the boy has brain damage in the left frontal lobes. He will never talk. He will never speak. And therefore, why are you wasting your time? And I said, perhaps the difference between you and us is that we don't have to know that we're going to succeed. We celebrate the trying, and you always have to believe you're going to get where you're going. How do you know? If you believe you can't get there, you don't try, and that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're going to at least try. And
you celebrate the trying.
Celebrate the trying.
So you dedicated yourself for at least a few months to try to help this child. And you want to see another beautiful little child. Take a look at Robertito right here. And how old is he here?
Robertito there, that's about when we began with him. He was self-stimulating. He was basically into himself. He was almost vegetable-like. We harnessed all these people. I think a real important story is that part of the story of the rebirth of Robertito is also the continued story of our once autistic child, Ron, because Ron becomes a teacher for Robertito with us as well. I remember one time when he realized the whole family was involved with Robertito, he said, Daddy, could I be one of the teachers too? And I said, I don't know, Ron, we'll see. He said, but I really want to. And I said, well, why do you want to? He said, because Daddy, I know 3 languages and you only know 2. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you know big people language. And I said, yes, talking to adults. He says, you know small people language. Yes, talking to children. He says, yeah, but I know autistic language and nobody else knows that. And I said, kid, you're hired. And he became part of the program in some way he now extended a hand to another child lost in darkness and brought him from behind the wall.
What was that first meeting like with Ron and Robertito?
Well, the first meeting, I can tell you a key meeting that was real special. We had not developed eye contact. And just to frame it, Robertito ultimately talked and rode bicycles and did mathematics and did everything everybody said was possible.
In how long?
In about a year and a half. Our 3 months turned into a year and a half. But it was very, very beautiful because it's not only the story of his evolution, the story of the mother who learned to love the child she had, not the child she dreamed of having. The father who came from a brutal environment and learned to express softness. Other people in the program went through dramatic changes.
And Ron, she became a little teacher, too.
Fantastic.
That's an important point that you made there about the mother who learned to love the child that she had instead of the child that she wished. I'm sure that happens with a lot of parents who have special children.
I think it happens with parents who have just regular so-called normal children. That so often parents create their own aspirations, their own goals for their children and try to kind of push them and force them. And what we're talking about is kind of being with the person where they are. A really beautiful story, and this is part of the miracles within A Miracle to Believe In, is that one time when Ron was first working with Robertito and moving with him and doing the different self-stimulating behaviors, suddenly Robertito sat down and Ron sat, and Ron at that time was 5.5 years old. And all of a sudden Robertito started looking at him, and they looked at each other. It was the first sustained eye contact, and it went on for almost a minute, and Susie and I are on the side of the room going, oh, we can't believe it, and we're clocking it and writing. And suddenly...
That's really exciting, I'll bet.
Oh, it was so incredible, because he hadn't looked at another human being in 6 years. And all of a sudden, Ron turns to us like deadpan, and he's 5.5, and he says, we're telling the truth to each other. We do it with our eyes. And then he turned back and continued his staring session with this little boy. I mean, really special stuff. Real special.
And I guess Ron was really feeling and understanding what was going on inside of Robertito.
On an intuitive level,
Yeah.
Absolutely. There was such a communication with them, despite the fact that Ron was now totally in our world and Robertito was still in
But
his
does
world.
Ron... Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Was Ron ever able to tell you what it was like in his world?
Yeah.
He's talked about it. I think the most special...
What does he say?
Well, he said that at one time he was real happy, and he loved to spin and rock and shake, but now that he's with us, he's real happy to be with us. A real beautiful thing was that one time when he was in kindergarten class, the teacher said, all the students should draw something that happened in the past, and the teacher called me up and said, I got to tell you something that was so strange, I've never seen it in all my teaching. All the kids drew about, they were in the zoo, they went to their grandparents. Ron drew a picture of his mother pregnant, and then a little picture of him inside the pregnant belly spinning a plate. So,
Oh, that's nice.
I think things come
That
from
child
people.
is something... He is a special child. Good gracious.
We have some people that like to talk with you about their children or
Sure.
about autism. Hello.
Good morning. Good
Hi.
morning, Mr. Kaufman. I have read your book, Sunrise, and I'm the parent of an autistic child. I have a little boy who at age 2 was not talking, and we began to get concerned, and we began to seek professional help for him. He's now 10, and I am a very proud parent because he is now doing things that I was told that he would never do. I commend you. And I think that you've set a milestone for parents of autistic children. And I'd like to ask you, are there any things being done on local and national levels for these autistic children? Because they are a special community. They are a new special community.
Well, a lot of the programs that we're aware of are programs that we feel are not very effective that are done for autistic children. As a matter of fact, there's something called the National Society for Autistic Children that tried to go to the FCC to take Sunrise off the air, to block its airing. I think because a lot of the programs are committed to techniques that have to do with using medication, that have to do with certain kinds of behavior modification programs. And my feeling is that I think, like what you're saying, is that doctors might ignore what you weren't willing to ignore, that a parent is in a very special position, that there are things that we could do as parents and even as friends of people who have special children.
Well, I've experienced that.
And maybe what I'm talking about is starting to follow ourselves. Rather than make the doctors the gods, make them our helpers and our aids, but take our own responsibility in saying, hey, we know, and we'll only do the things that feel good to us about our children.
I agree with you.
Thank you for being on the program. You said some very nice things about Barry. Barry, you know, it upsets me to learn, and I hadn't read about it, that there were people that actually didn't want that beautiful story to be seen. That is very upsetting.
I think part of it, again, unfortunately, is that what we're advocating, which is, and that's what A Miracle is somehow, is a blueprint that we could all do it for ourselves. I think it becomes threatening to people who are economically committed to other processes.
Because people feel guilty. They feel like you're saying that if you would take the time to do this, you could do the same thing that we did.
And very important, nothing that we have done is a comment on what somebody else does. In other words, if people did the best they could before penicillin, well, now there's penicillin and there's another way. If people did the best they could with autistic children doing these methods, they did the best they could. We're not making a comment on that. We're just saying, hey, here's another process.
Here's another
it's
way.
loving. It feels good. Maybe that's something to try.